Despite the fact that every star has a narrative to tell in this age of flashing cameras and unending fame, there are certain stories that go deeper than what is shown in the spotlight. Hello and welcome to the Celebrities Era, where you will experience the rise, the collapse, and all in between. In spite of her celebrity and the fun she brought to the world, Lucille Ball's life was full with mysteries. This film exposes the stunning truth of a forbidden love that completely altered the course of events. Long before she became a well-known figure, Lucille Ball was a little girl from Jamestown, New York. She did not become famous until much later. Her early life was not at all like the flash and glamour of Hollywood, despite the fact that she was born on August 6, 1911. Her mother was compelled to work long hours, and her father passed away when she was only 3 years old. As a result, Lucille was nurtured mostly by her grandparents rather than by her own parents. In spite of the challenging circumstances, there was something about Lucille that stuck out. A spark, a natural sense of humor, and a flair for the theatrical were all things that she had. Nevertheless, nobody, not even Lucille herself, could have foreseen the extent to which that spark would lead her to success. It was only when she was 15 years old that she decided to join at the John Murray Anderson School for the Dramatic Arts in New York City. This was the same school that had taught famous actors such as Bette Davis. In contrast to Davis, Lucille had a difficult time. The professors who were in charge of her did not think she had what it required to succeed. They informed her that she was not talented. In point of fact, Lucille was not the sort of person to give up lightly, despite the fact that it was a severe blow. She packed up her hopes and aspirations and left New York, traveling west to Hollywood in the hopes of achieving success there. Lucille had already secured a few modest roles in B-movies by the time the 1930s began. She was a Goldwyn girl, she appeared in musicals, and she worked in whatever roles she could get, much of the time without receiving credit for them. She had a more glamorous appearance than she had a witty one back then. As she played chorus girls, models, and showgirls, she always hoped for a breakthrough moment. She bleached her hair blonde and performed all of these roles. The event, however, took some time. A number of years passed with little acknowledgement. Despite this, Lucille did not give up. She approached each and every position, regardless of how minor it was, as if it were her big break. Off-screen, she was well known for her unwavering dedication to her career. Studying humor, working on her timing, and paying close attention to what made audiences laugh were all things that she did. After a lot of hard work and determination, she was finally given a role in the radio program My Favorite Husband in the 1940s. That show turned out to be a defining moment. Not only did it provide Lucille the opportunity to completely develop her humorous gifts, but it also opened the door to something much more significant. At the time when CBS made the decision to bring the program to television, Lucille gave her consent, but she stipulated that her real-life husband, Desi Arnaz, would also be required to perform the role of her on-screen spouse. It was a daring request at a time when networks were reluctant to feature interracial couples, but Lucille would not back down from her position. I Love Lucy was born as a result of this. On October 15, 1951, the first episode was shown, and after that, television was never the same. Lucille became an immediate sensation due to her fiery red hair, offbeat facial expressions, and hilarious physical comedy. Not only was she hilarious, but she was also courageous. By stomping grapes and stuffing chocolates into her mouth, she managed to make the people of the United States giggle week after week. The authority that she wielded behind the scenes was comparable. She made history by being the first woman to head a major television studio when she became a co-owner of Desilu Productions. A number of successful films, including The Untouchables, Star Trek, and Mission Impossible, were produced by Desilu when she was in charge. It is not enough to say that Lucille Ball was a performer. She was also a pioneer. She demonstrated that there was a way to break down barriers through ability and drive during a period when women were sometimes expected to remain silent or play a secondary role. While working in a field that was controlled by men, she was able to demand respect and forever alter the landscape of television. Although her co-workers loved her for her power, her fans liked her for the comedy she possessed. Despite the fact that most people were unaware of it, the lady who was the source of all the laughing was actually concealing secrets that she never completely disclosed to the rest of the world. There was a connection that was not publicized in the media, and it was one of those secrets. It was a relationship that was genuine, potent, and concealed from the view of the general public. On TV, Lucille and Desi depicted themselves as the ideal pair, yet behind the scenes their relationship was far more complex. Despite the fact that their marriage was filled with passion and love in its early years, it eventually became strained due to Desi's infidelity and his extended absences. In the background, Lucille's personal life began to fall apart as she advanced in her professional career. In the midst of all that turmoil, she was confronted with an unexpected person who entered her life. Someone who would alter everything, not only in her emotions, but also in the way she would go from that point forward. Lucille Ball had established a life that millions of people admired, including fame, riches, and a popular television program that was watched by almost every household in the United States. However, success on film did not necessarily indicate that the actor was happy behind the scenes. Despite the fact that it is sometimes idealized, her marriage to Desi Arnaz was not at all like a fairy tale. However, their private lives presented a different tale. Despite the fact that they enjoyed moments of genuine devotion and creative genius with one another, both of them had been impacted negatively as a result of Desi's drinking, his extramarital affairs, and the ongoing burden of operating a studio together. For the sake of love, for the sake of their children, and for the image that they had constructed, Lucille had made an effort to keep the marriage together. But the cracks were becoming deeper, and she was getting more and more exhausted. In the course of this period, Lucille discovered that she was emotionally depleted and becoming increasingly by herself. Despite the fact that she had spent a significant portion of her life delivering happiness to millions of people by entertaining them, there were times when she would return home, shut the door, and experience a profound sense of isolation. Friends would later comment that Lucille carried a loneliness that celebrity could not repair. It was a feeling that despite everything she had done, something was still lacking. A sense that she was missing something. It was at one of these challenging times that she came into contact with a person who had a different perspective on her. This person did not see her as a celebrity or a manager, but rather as a woman who might benefit from care and connection. In Hollywood, he was not like any other gentleman. Even though he was prosperous, respected, and well known for his own talent, he avoided the limelight whenever he could, whenever he had the opportunity to do so. They had brief discussions with one another at industry gatherings and brief exchanges in quiet places when they initially met. Their early encounters were informal and seemingly accidental. On the other hand, Lucille observed something peculiar about him. He was attentive, but not in the sense of a fan or a colleague, rather in the sense of someone who actually wanted to understand her and not simply her reputation. These peaceful chats eventually evolved into longer walks, phone calls late at night, and private dinners away from the cameras. Over time, they became more and more frequent. It was not scripts or ratings that he inquired about. It was the things that most people had forgotten she still possessed, such as her childhood, her worries, and her dreams, that he inquired about. When Lucille was with him, she laughed in a manner that was distinct from the laughter that she shared with the United States. It was more gentle. It's true, their relationship became stronger in a short amount of time, yet it remained hidden from view. It was well known that the general public would never approve of this romantic partnership. Despite the fact that Lucille was still married to Desi, the reputation of being America's sweethearts was more significant than anything else. While her marriage was falling apart, she felt as though she was being held captive by expectations of the network, of the audience, and of the picture-perfect existence that she had labored so diligently to create for herself. However, this man, who was a calm presence in her otherwise hectic environment, provided her with something that she hadn't experienced in years: tranquility. He made no attempt to help her in any way. It was not necessary for her to be witty or perfect for him. He just remained, in a kind and constant manner, with us through the good days as well as the terrible days. Whenever Lucille felt like she couldn't handle the burden of operating Desilu or maintaining her public character, she would sneak away to spend time with him. This would allow her to escape the overwhelming feelings she was experiencing. It was simply two individuals enjoying time that seemed regular, almost holy. There was no red carpet, and there were no cameras around. They maintained a high level of discretion over their intimacy. They were able to maintain their privacy despite the fact that they worked in an industry that was rife with rumors and treachery. Few of my closest friends were aware of it, and even those few friends never discussed it in public. On occasion, Lucille would conceal letters that she had written late at night by putting them away in drawers or stowing them away in a bag. Words that are brimming with yearning, consolation, and even suffering at times, mostly due to the fact that love is never an easy task. Despite this, she found that love to be a safe haven for her. While she was wearing all of the clothes and makeup, it brought to her attention the fact that she was still Lucille, the woman, and not the character. During the time that the entire world was cheering for Lucy Ricardo, it was this quiet love that served as a reminder to her that she was deserving of devotion even without cheers. On the other hand, time started to work against them, just as it does with many covert relationships. Several difficult decisions had to be taken, while others were unavoidable. It was a fork in the road for Lucille. She had to confront the fact that her marriage was on the verge of disintegrating, the prospect of her professional life, and the question of whether or not her personal happiness was worth the danger of being judged by the public. Indeed, she would reach a point of no return as a result of her decision, one that would eternally alter the course that her life would go from that point on. The pressure of faking had become intolerable at this point. Putting on a show for the world was something that Lucille Ball was an expert at doing. No matter if she was falling over props on a studio or smiling on red carpets, she was able to offer exactly what people needed, whatever the circumstances. Behind those brilliant eyes, however, was a woman who was divided in two. She was still married to a public marriage that was silently going apart, and she was also quietly bound to a love that had never been permitted to live in the light. Over the course of several years, it became hard to overlook the tension that existed inside Desi Arnaz's household. It was no longer the case that they were partners, at least not in the sense that was significant. Their emotional relationship had deteriorated, despite the fact that they continued to share professional responsibilities at Desilu. At the same time as Desi's conduct became more erratic, his evenings were longer, and his patience became shorter. She continued to come up to work with her hair styled and her smile prepared, demonstrating that Lucille was a true professional. However, after the cameras stopped filming, the illusion was no longer presented. Now the hidden connection, which had previously served as her getaway, was caught in the midst. The person who had been her confidant, and the one who had provided her with comfort, had grown weary of living in the shadows. A genuine life with her was what he desired. Although quiet, they are truthful. In addition, Lucille desired that. Her need for calm was greater than everything else. However, she was also filled with fear, afraid of the consequences that might follow if the world were to learn the truth. She is concerned about the potential harm that it may cause to her family, her empire, and her reputation. On a more fundamental level, she was terrified of beginning over. However, fate does not typically wait for permission. Lucille eventually made the decision that had been weighing heavily on her mind for many years in 1960, after she had been married for 20 solid years. Desi was the subject of her divorce petition. It was a terrible experience. In addition to the fact that their relationship had come to an end, it was also because of the things that they had created together. I Love Lucy had been a partnership in every sense of the word, and having to split ways with Desi felt like she was parting ways with a significant portion of herself. She was aware that the moment had come. Following the announcement of the divorce, the fans were taken aback. There was no longer an ideal television pair. Despite the fact that the headlines were filled with rumors and conjecture, Lucille held the truth close to her breast. Throughout those trying years, she never revealed the identity of the guy who had served as her rock. The nature of their connection remained a secret, just as it had been from the beginning. Nevertheless, those who were closest to her observed a change. There was a gentleness in her, a peaceful relaxation, as if she had finally let go of a load that was too big for her to bear. Lucille's primary emphasis in the months that followed was on reestablishing her life. She became the sole leader of the studio after purchasing Desi's portion in Desilu and taking over operations. This action was a momentous one. The first time in history that a woman was in charge of a big production firm on her own was achieved. In addition, she approached it with courage and lucidity. Perhaps it was the same clarity that she had obtained from the intimate love that had kept her going through the difficulties of quiet. Nevertheless, despite the fact that she had taken charge of her professional life, her heart continued to be problematic. Throughout the storms, the guy whom she had silently loved for such a long time had been there for her. However, now that she had finally gained her independence, things started to shift at this point. The fact that they were combining two distinct lives, lives that had always been on the periphery, proved to be more challenging than either of them had anticipated. They were able to construct something effective while it was hidden from view, but it was challenging to bring it into the light. They eventually parted ways, not out of resentment or treachery, but rather out of a serene acceptance to the passage of time. In a time when the world had not provided them with anything, they had provided what they required to one another, a secure location. A type of love that did not require the presence of cameras or the media. However, the timing was, as it always is, the most terrible aspect in following interviews. Lucille would discuss how certain relationships are not intended to survive forever, but this does not imply that they were not genuine or significant in any way. She was of the opinion that certain loves were solely designed to help you get through the most difficult parts of your life. Indeed, he had carried out the action in question at a time when her world was falling apart. He had been her safe haven. Furthermore, despite the fact that their journey did not culminate in marriage or images, it left an indelible mark on Lucille Ball that has never been erased. It was readily apparent in the manner in which she smiled in her latter years. It was gentler and more rooted in the decisions that she made for herself, for her children, and for the sake of her own mental well-being. The man who had loved her without any restrictions, without any inquiries, and without the need for acclaim was someone she never thought of forgetting. Lucille would eventually remarry at some point in the future. She was able to find a new companion in Gary Morton, a stand-up comedian who allowed her to experience a sense of peace in her final years. Gary provided her with a sense of stability. The fire and passion of the past were no longer present. Rather, it was a calm companionship that made it possible for her to finally relax. She was more mature, more experienced, and prepared for a relationship that was more intimate. On the other hand, the echoes of that secret relationship, the one that helped her make it through the most difficult times in her life, continued to be a part of her tale forever. Lucille was aware of his identity, even if the rest of the world was unaware of it. And she held that recollection close to her heart at all times. Not in the context of a controversy. This is not a secret, but she made the decision to keep this particular chapter of truth to herself.